In this video, I'll be walking you through a mini Python project where we will create a basic text editor. If you enjoy this project, feel free to extend it and add more features. Here, I'm just going to give you the basics, show you how to set everything up, and introduce you to a graphics library that's built into Python called tkinter. This is fairly basic, but for beginner or intermediate programmers, this is a great project and kind of a great starting place where you can go and extend, learn more, and add to this project. With that said, if you want to learn more about Python, you want some more advanced projects, or just to become a better software engineer, check out my course programmingexpert.io. There'll be a link in the description. If you're interested in Web3 or blockchain development, I have a course for that called Blockchain Expert. Same thing, link in the description. With that said, let's get into the project. All right, so we're going to get started, but I quickly want to give credit to this blog where I've actually taken this idea and quite a bit of this code from. I've altered it slightly just to make it a bit better for the video, but if you're looking for some other Python project ideas, check out the blog. It has a bunch of them, and I'm probably going to be converting a lot of the ideas they have there into full videos where I really explain everything that's going on, which is kind of what's missing from that kind of basic blog post. Regardless, let's dive into it here. The first thing we need to do is import the graphics library we're going to use, which is known as tkinter. So we're going to say import tkinter, and then this is not from, we're going to say as tk. Now, tk is just the alias that we're going to use for the tkinter library, just so we don't have to continually write out tkinter. Now, the way that tkinter works is it allows us to have a grid layout and place different widgets on a screen. So we can create like a tkinter window, and then within that window, we can put buttons, we can put like a text editing component, we can put images, we can put all kinds of different stuff, and you can actually create some pretty interesting and complex user interfaces. We're going to do a pretty basic one here, but to get started, I'm going to create a main function, and inside of this main function is where I'm going to write a bulk of the tkinter code. So the first thing that we need to do here is create a tkinter window. That's where we're going to place all of our different widgets on. So I'm going to say my window is equal to tk dot and then capital TK like that. Now what I'm going to do is set the title of the window. So I'm going to say window dot title, and then we'll just call this text editor. And then I'm going to go down here and say window dot main loop. Now, main loop is essentially going to continually run the window and keep it alive for us until the user hits the X button on the window or force quits it. So I just want to demonstrate this to you so you can see what the window looks like. Then we'll start placing some widgets onto it. So I've created this main function. I've set my window, or created the window, set the title, did window.mainLoop. It's important that you have that so it keeps running. And then I've called the main function. And now if I run my code, you see we get a little tkinter window here. We can kind of change the size of it. Okay, perfect. Now that we've done that, what I want to do is kind of set the size of the window and explain to you what we're going to put on it. So since we're going to have a text editor, we're going to have a few different kind of components, or what would you call it, widgets on the screen. We're going to have the text editing component, and then we're going to have two buttons, one button that says open and one button that says save. So when you hit save, it's going to allow you to save it to your computer. Open, obviously you're going to open it, and then you're able to edit the text. So the first widget we're going to build is the text edit widget. Now to do that, we're going to make a variable called text_edit, and this is going to be equal to tk.text. Text is just the text editing component, widget, whatever you want to call it. Now inside of here, the first mandatory argument we have to pass is the window that we want to place this on. I want to place this on my tk window, so that's why I'm placing it. Next, we have the option to pass, for example, a font. We don't have to do this, but I'm going to. And then you could pass a background color, foreground color, border. There's all kinds of different arguments. I'm not going to get into all of them because that would be an entire video on its own. But for now, we'll do a font, and then we'll set the size of this to be 18. Now, if you wanted it to be bold, for example, you would type bold afterwards. You could do italic. There's a lot of different options. Again, I'm not going to get into all of them. So now that we have our text edit component, I want to render this onto the screen. Now remember, I said that tkinter uses a grid system, so this allows you to lay things out based on a row and column position. Now row 0 and column 0 is going to be the top left-hand corner of your window. So if you were to place at column 1, then you'd be moving over to the right. If you place at row 1, you'd be going down by 1, because again, column 0, row 0 is top left-hand corner. Now, the row and column system depends on how many elements you have inside of it, but for now, I'm going to say text edit, and then I have to use this method called .grid, and .grid is going to place this element onto the grid of the parent. So I'm going to say row is equal to 0 and column is equal to 1. And that's because I want the text edit component to be on the right-hand side, and then my buttons are going to be on the left-hand side. Now, there's a lot of other arguments you can pass here as well, but for now, we can just do row 0, column 0, and just see what this looks like. Okay, so when I open this up, see that I now have my text editing component, and even though I've placed this at column 1, it's taking up the entire screen because I don't have anything in column 0, so it's just automatically going to fill the entire screen. Now, if you wanted to set the size of this component, what you actually would have to do is set the size of the row and column that you're placing this component into. I know it seems a little bit strange, but what we can do is the following. We can say window.configure and then row, and then we're going to pass row 0, and then we can say the minimum size is equal to, and then something like 400. If we do that, now we're going to be setting the size of our row to 400, and we can do the same thing for our column. We can set this to a size of, say, 500. So now when I run this, I get an error, and that's because, sorry, this is not configure row, it is row configure, and it's not configure column, it is column configure. Okay, so let's try this now, and notice that everything is a little bit larger. So we've manually set the size there of the column and of the row. Now, we'll fix this layout in a second, but for now you can see kind of how I've adjusted the size using this row configure and column configure. And I see the issue here. I need to configure column 1 to be this size, not column 0. So now if I go back and change it, notice we're all good because we didn't set the size of column 0, which right now has a size of 0 because nothing's inside of it. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have the text edit component. The next thing we want to do is create the buttons and then place the buttons onto the screen. So how do we create the buttons? Well, I want to have a frame, and the frame is going to be just like a kind of vertical column that is going to store my different buttons. So I'm going to say frame is equal to tk.frame. Now inside of the frame, same thing, I need to specify what window I want this to be on, and I'm going to pass a few other arguments. So I'm going to pass relief. Relief is essentially the 3D appearance of the element, and for this I'm going to say tk, which remember is my tkinter library here, dot, and then raised, and that's going to raise the element up a bit so it looks three-dimensional. Then I'm going to do BD, which stands for border, and I'm going to set that to 2, so we have a 2-pixel border around our frame. Okay, so let's just place the frame into the window so we can see what it looks like. Then we can place the buttons onto the frame. So I'm going to say frame.grid, and remember, I want the frame to be on the left side. So I'm going to go row equals 0, and I'm going to say column equals 0 as well. So now, if we run, we should have our frame on the left-hand side of the screen, and it is there, but the issue is we haven't set the size of the frame, so it's there, but we're just not seeing it. So if I want to have the frame have a size, I need to put something inside of it, or I need to manually set the width and the height. So what we can do now is just put some things inside of our frame, and then we can kind of render the frame afterwards. So underneath my frame, I'm going to create my buttons. Now to do that, I'm going to say save button is equal to tk.button. Again, I'm going to place this actually on my frame. I don't want it on the window. I want it on the frame. The frame's then going to go on the window. And then I'm going to specify the text. And I believe the text is just text like this. We'll call this save. There's a few other things we can do, but for now, we're just going to do that. Next, we're going to have the open button. I'm going to say this equal to tk.button. Again, this will go on the frame. And the text will be equal to open. Now we need to render these onto the frame, just like we rendered the frame onto the window. So I'm going to say save button dot grid, and just like our window has a grid, our frame has a grid as well. So I'm going to say row is equal to 0, column is equal to 0 for my save button. I want that at the top. Then I'm going to say open button dot grid, and then row is equal to 1. This is going to place it below, and then column is equal to 0. Okay, so now if I do that, we should be seeing these buttons appear, although this is call, this needs to be column, sorry, so let's fix that. And if we rerun, we can see our 2 buttons. Now they're looking a little bit weird, so if we want to fix this, what we need to do is we need to make our frame be at the top. Right now it's kind of centered vertically in the middle of the screen. We want to push the frame upwards, and then we want to make the buttons kind of expand a bit and be a little larger. So we're going to start by making our frame go to the top of the screen. To do that, I'm going to go to frame.grid here. I'm going to pass another argument called sticky. Now, sticky allows us to stick the frame to a certain side of the screen. So I'm going to stick this to NS. Now, when you write NS, what that actually means is we are going to expand the frame so that it sticks to the north, which is the top, and to the south side of whatever it's inside of. So in this case, just the window. So if you were to do ES like that, or east-west, sorry, then you'd be expanding and sticking to either side on the east and the west of the window. So if I do at S, then it's just the opposite. We're doing this vertically. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense, but that's going to make the frame fill the entire screen. So let's have a look at that now. And notice now we fill the entire screen, and our buttons by default are going to be at the top because we haven't specified like a sticky argument for the buttons. Okay, perfect. Next, what we're going to do is add a little bit of padding between the frame and between our different buttons. So for my save button, for example, when I put this in the grid, I'm going to say pad underscore. Actually, I'm not sure if it's pad underscore or just pad. I think it's pad X like this is going to be equal to 5 pixels. So pad 5 pixels on both the right and left-hand side. And then I'm going to say pad, and I think this is Y, and we'll pad it by 5 pixels there as well. Now coming here, we can just pad this one by 5 pixels, and now we should see that it's a little bit separated from the frame. So let's do that, and notice now that we are separated from the frame, we can press on our buttons and see how the frame is kind of elevated. It's raised up a little bit. That's because we specified that argument. Okay, next what we can do is we can make our buttons be the same width. So you saw there that they were smaller just because one of them has, I guess, larger text than the other one. So the way that we can make our buttons be the same width is we can use this sticky property. So I can say sticky is equal to, and then I can go EW, so east-west. Again, that's going to allow me to expand outwards in the east and west direction. So in the, horizontal direction. If you just did east, then you would stick to the east side. If you did west, you'd go to the west side, etc. There's a bunch of different arguments here. Okay, and then for this one, same thing. East-west, and now we should see it expanding. So let's run this, and notice now our buttons are the same width. We expand to the full size of our frame. Okay, fantastic. And if we go here, we can write in our text editor. So we're getting somewhere. Next, what we need to do is make the buttons actually do something, and then allow us to like save and open the file. All right, so let's go with that. So for our buttons here, there is an argument that we can pass, which is command. Now, command is going to be a function that we want to call whenever we press the button. So let's do a very basic one. We're going to say define test, okay, print run, and then I'm just going to show you that if I write the name of this function here, then tkinter is going to call this test function anytime this button is pressed. So if I go here and I click on save, notice that run is printing out in my terminal. Okay, perfect. So what we want to do is we want to have a function that is open file. Okay. We want to have another function that is save file, like this. Now in these functions, what we're going to do is either open a file, which means we're going to replace the current contents of our text editor with the contents of a new text file, or we're going to save the existing contents to a file, and then I guess we could continue editing it. So we can start here in our open file function, where we're going to take 2 parameters, window and text edit. These are the 2 things that we need from the main function to be able to kind of modify the screen and change what's showing up in our text editing, widget. Now, before we do that, we're going to say from tkinter dot, and I believe this is file dialog. Let me just check my cheat sheet. That is correct. We are going to import the ask open file name, and if we spell this correctly, the ask save as file name, like that. Okay, so these are 2 dialogues or kind of things that we can use to pop open that, save as, open as, etc. Okay, so first, open file. Well, the first thing we need to do when we're opening a file is select that file. So to do that, we're going to say the file path is equal to ask open file name, and here we need to pass all of the different file types we could potentially be opening. So file types are going to be like a text file, a Python file, etc. In our case, we probably just want to accept text files. So to do that, we're going to pass inside of here a tuple, and we're going to say text files, and then we're going to say the extension, which is *.txt. So you just give a name. This is like the options of things you can select, and then a pattern that you want to match files against. In our case, we're only looking at anything that starts with whatever and ends in .txt. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now that we have the file path, we just want to make sure the user actually did select a file. So I'm going to say if not file path, meaning they didn't select something, then return, because we can't open anything if they haven't selected a file. Otherwise, we are going to open this file and then put it inside of our kind of like text editor component. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of everything that's currently inside of our text editor. So to do that, we're going to say text edit.delete. And we're going to delete from 1.0. Now, 1.0 here is a little bit weird, but this is saying line and then position or character. So when you say 1, you're saying line 1, which is the first line, and then 0, which is the first character. So this is the very start of the file. It's a little bit weird because you'd think it'd be 0.0, but they've done 1.0. So the first line is line 1, where the first character is 0. I know it's a little bit backwards, but that's what they have. Then we're going to say tk.end, and .end is going to represent the very end of the file. However many like lines are in it, it's just going to be the ending index. So kind of a global variable we can use there. Okay, now that we have that deleted, we are going to open the file. So we're going to say with open file path, and then we're going to open this in read mode, and we're going to say open this as F. Okay, now we're going to read in the contents of the file. To do that, we're going to say content is equal to f.read. Okay, so this allows us to open the file. We have the file object as f. We're reading the contents of the file. Now we're going to take the contents and put that inside of our text editing component. So we're going to say here text edit.insert, and we're going to insert at tk.end the content. Now, since we've deleted everything inside of the text edit component, end is now going to be the very beginning of the file. So at the beginning of the file, insert all of the content. There you go. We've just placed that inside. Then last thing we can do is change the name of our window so that it's the name of this file, like you would have in something like Microsoft Word or text edit. So we're going to say window dot, and I think this is just title. And then we can use an F string, and we're going to say this is text. Actually, not text. We're going to say file path, and then we can do something like open file, colon, and then whatever the name of the file is. You can choose what you want to put here. I'm just kind of doing this so we can see that we're changing the window title. All right, before we go much further, let's try to use this function and see if it actually works. So the way that we can do that is we can go to our, not save button, but to our open button, and we can set the command. Now, remember that we need to write the name of the function as our command. The issue is we have to accept 2 arguments here in the function, the window and text edit, and I can't just do this. I can't say command is equal to open file and then write the 2 arguments in. If I do that, I'm immediately going to call this function. It's not going to be called when I press the button, because what happens when you press the button is it takes the function name and then it calls it. This is different. This is actually calling the function right away. So what we actually need to do is use something called a lambda, which essentially is like an anonymous function. It's a way to write a function in one line. So we're going to write lambda, colon, and then open file, and we're going to pass window, and then our text edit component like that. So really what this means is now we have a function that calls this function with the arguments that we need. So open button will use this function, it will call it, which will then call this function with the required arguments. A little bit advanced syntax there, but hopefully that makes a tiny bit of sense. Okay, let's try to run this now and see if we can open a file. So I'm going to go to open, and I guess we need a file that I can potentially open. I don't think I have any text files on here. So let me create a new text file, and then once we do that, we can try to open it. All right, so let's try to open this file. I just created one here on my desktop, and we have test. When I opened up, notice it loads the contents of that file. Perfect. Okay, now that we know how to open a file, let's try to save a file. So saving a file is going to be very similar here. Same thing, we want to take file path is equal to ask save as file name. And then same thing, we're going to take our file types here. We can just copy this and paste it inside of here. Okay, next we're going to say if not file path, then return. And now we are going to open a new file and then take the content of our text edit component or widget and put it inside of that file. So to do this, we're going to say with open file path. This time we're going to open in W mode, which stands for write mode. Keep in mind this will override a file if it already exists. I'm then going to say as f. Then I'm going to say my content is equal to, and now we need to take our window and text edit as parameters again. So let's paste those in here. I'm going to say text edit dot get, and I'm going to get from the beginning of the file to the end of the file. Okay. So similar to deleting, this is just going to give us whatever text is in these positions. And now I can say f.write, and I can write my content. And then same thing, I can change my title here. So I say window.title, and then this is the file path. Feel free to change that if you want, but that's what I'll have it for now. Okay, so now that we have that, let's do the same thing to call our save file. So I'm going to copy this command and paste it here and just change this to say save file. So let's try this out. I'm going to go run, save. Actually, let's go hello world. Okay, save this as hello world.txt. We'll just save this onto my desktop. Okay, now let's shut this down, rerun it, open. And if I go here to hello world and open it up, I get hello world. Perfect. So our text editor is now functional. The very last thing I want to show you how to do is add keyboard shortcuts. So now you can hit Control S and Control O to run those same commands. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go down to the bottom of our program here, and we're going to bind a command to a key press. So the way to do this is type window.bind. Now the command for Control S is Control-S like this. So make sure you type it exactly as I have it with the kind of angle brackets, Control fully typed out -S, and then you combine this to the same command you have here. So just copy it and paste it. But very important, make sure you put an X here or some parameter, because for this, it actually passes one argument. I know it seems a bit weird, but it essentially calls whatever function you have here with a single argument. So you need to make sure you have an argument here. Otherwise, it's going to fail. If you haven't kind of figured out how this works, this is a function, essentially the same as saying define, function, whatever. And then X is an argument that you can pass to the function. Now, you could have multiple arguments like that. In our case, we're just going to have one. Okay, now I'm going to copy the same thing, and we're going to do Control O for open. And then we're going to go here to open file. And again, just make sure you have at least one argument here, or that you have one argument here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So now if I rerun and I use my keyboard, I can do Control O and Control S, and I can toggle those commands. All right, so let me zoom out here just so you can read all of the code at once, or most of the code at once. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. So this was just a mini Python project. Wanted to give you a quick introduction to tkinter, show you how you can do things like open files, save files, and just get, a cool kind of text editor under your belt. Obviously, this is very, very basic. There's a lot more stuff you would want to do, like setting something to bold, maybe italicizing, having headers, all kinds of different stuff you can go out and create using tkinter. Hopefully this gave you a bit of inspiration and you enjoyed the video. So with that said, I'm going to wrap it up here. Remember to check out Programming Expert and Blockchain Expert from the link in the description. I look forward to seeing you in another mini Python project tutorial.